was the only cabinet minister of Asian descent in the government that Prime Minister Jomo Kenyatta formed just before Kenya's independence from British rule in 1963. Joseph Zuzat Murumbi was born in 1911 in what was then Uasin Gishu district of Rift Valley province. His Goan father, Peter Nicholas Zuzat, had come to Kenya in 1897, at the same time as the first railway was just entering the areas occupied by the Uasin Gishu Maasai. His mother was the daughter of Murumbi, the Laibon or traditional leader of the Uasin Gishu Maasai. Murumbi was only 6 or 7 years old when his father took him to India for schooling. He came back to Kenya in 1931 and for a number of years tried farming on his mother's land in Uasin Gishu, but it was tough going. Before the Second World War broke out, he went to Somaliland, where he worked as a clerk of the council during that country's Italian occupation. He would later work for the British Army during the war that eventually drove Benito Mussolini's fascist forces out of the Horn of Africa. Murumbi became politicized by the war experience. After returning to Kenya in early 1952, he joined the Kenya African Union, KAU, then the main political party led by Jomo Kenyatta that was fighting for African rights in Kenya. When on October 22, 1952, the British colonial governor Sir Evelyn Baring declared a state of emergency throughout Kenya in an effort to contain the Mau Mau rebellion, Murumbi was one of those who helped organize and pay for the legal defense of Kenyatta and 5 of his freedom-fighting colleagues, whom the colonial government put on trial at Kapenguria on charges of organizing the Mau Mau rebellion. Because of the colonial government's displeasure at his support of the so-called Kapenguria Six, Murumbi was in early 1953 forced to leave Kenya for India, where he would stay for a few months as a guest of the ruling Indian National Congress before going to Britain. Murumbi would spend the next 9 years in Britain campaigning for Kenya's freedom. He was one of the first people in Britain to call for the release of Kenyatta and his Kapenguria colleagues, who had by then been found guilty and jailed for their part in the Mau Mau rebellion. It was during his exile in England that Murumbi met a young English librarian, Sheila Kane, whom he later married. It was Sheila who got Murumbi involved in collecting African art, a hobby that would later make him the world's greatest collector of African art. Murumbi did not come back to Kenya until 1962, after the last of the Lancaster House Constitutional Conferences had set May 1963 as the date for the last general election before the granting of independence. By then, the country's hitherto united nationalist movement had been split. 2 parties were now vying for power. There was the Kenya African National Union, KANU, led by Kenyatta, who had been released from detention in 1961. And there was the Kenya African Democratic Union, KADU, led by Ronald Ngala. Murumbi had joined KANU even before coming back to Kenya. In London, he had helped raise considerable sums of money for KANU's campaign for the coming general election. And it was on a KANU ticket that he now vied for and won the Lang'ata parliamentary seat in Nairobi in the May 1963 election. KANU won a resounding victory in that general election, garnering 83 of the 124 seats in the House of Representatives. On June 1st, Kenyatta became the first Prime Minister of Kenya. In his new government, Kenyatta, who had personally campaigned for Murumbi in the Lang'ata race, appointed him Minister of State in the office of the Prime Minister. On Kenya's attainment of independence on December 12, 1963, he made Murumbi Kenya's first foreign minister.